We're talking taters, talking specialty crops, talking to a guy that knows a lot about all that stuff. Big time farmer, processor, producer of food from the Pacific Northwest with the Oregon Potato Company in this episode of the Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of the Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field, then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. I've got on Keith Tiegs, going to be a client of mine. Actually, I'm speaking to them this week. I'm recording this here at the end of March. On March 28th, I'm going to be joining them in Pasco, Washington for an employee function. His company is Oregon Potato Company. He has reassumed the role of president after his father's passing. And I said, you know what, you should come on and talk. I haven't talked to Taters on this show for a long time, if I ever have. And I said, it's such a fascinating thing to me. I've worked for potato groups quite a bit over the years, from New Brunswick to Manitoba, Alberta, Colorado, Washington, of course, Idaho. And I said, let's talk about this. So overview of the company, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And, you know, it's our American staple. It is our starch. And yet it's only grown really mainly in about 10 states. You grow a lot of them up there, and you do more than just potatoes, because on your non-potato years, you've got to produce something else on those acres. So I want to hear all about it. Overview of you and the company.
Yeah, so overview of me. Graduated college from Washington State University in 2004. Came back to work for my father right after that, working on the farm, working in the business. Worked there for a little over 11 years. And 8 years ago, actually went out on my own, farmed on my own, started a fertilizer business. And then in the last year or so, as his health declined, we kind of made the decision that he wanted this business to continue to go on, and he wanted me to run it. So here we are after his passing in early February. Had kind of worked myself kind of back into it after the first of the year when he went to the hospital, and now we're just proceeding forward.
You're a vertically integrated company. And potatoes are an interesting thing to the person that's listening to this that knows corn and soybeans or wheat or whatever. Potatoes, I think once you pick up Idaho is about 1/3 of potato production, or Washington's like another 25%. I think once you get Idaho and Washington, you've got more than half of all the potatoes grown in the United States of America. I think that's right. Yes?
Yep.
I think there's like 1 or 1.1 million acres of potatoes in the United States on an annual basis.
1.2 to 1.5.
Okay, 1.2 to 1.5 million acres is roughly. And again, you can only grow them like every 3, 4, 5 years because you want to rotate them out for disease purposes, et cetera, fertility. So I want to get into all that. How many of those 1.2 million acres are in the Oregon Potato Company's wheelhouse?
Well, not going to go to right exact numbers, but we farm potatoes north of 30,000 acres of potatoes.
Okay, so you've got about 100. The number of acres that you farm in general, because only about every 3 or 4 years are potatoes. So you're talking 4 times that.
Yeah, we farm about 140,000 acres.
Okay, about 140,000 acres, and on a general year, on an average year, 30,000 of those 140 are in potatoes.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so then what's going on the other acres?
So we'll do, we own a lot of vegetable processing plants. We got in the vegetable business with our first acquisition in 2007. So we do a lot of green peas, sugar snap peas, beans, green beans, sweet corn, carrots, onions. So a variety of those will kind of work into our crop rotation on any given year. We also do a lot of grains. We do a lot of field corn. We'll do a lot of wheat. But we try to grow a lot of vegetables because that's what we do. We process a lot of vegetables, not just potatoes.
So your father started this. I mean, he was presumably a farm kid. Did he buy or open the first processing facility?
Yeah. So actually, my dad is originally from Idaho, moved up here in 18 years old, 1975, came to the Columbia Basin to Pasco. Him and my mom got married in the late 70s, had me in the early 80s. And by 1985, he bought a fresh potato shed, which was kind of his first foray into kind of diversifying. He was growing for French fry processors and then kind of got into the fresh business. And then shortly thereafter, bought an apple packing warehouse up in the Yakima area, just outside of Zilla. And so kind of was in that. And then in the early 2000s, he bought a company, which Oregon Potato at the time had a plant in Boardman, Oregon and Warden, Washington. And they're primarily dehydrated potatoes. So flakes, flour, and then our Warden plant actually does like frozen, does frozen dices, dehydrated frozen products that you'd see in, say soups.
Yeah, I want to get into all where the stuff goes here in a little bit, but I'm still sticking on the background of the company. First off, I didn't know if anybody caught that you're called the Oregon Potato Company and you're headquartered in Pasco, Washington. I didn't know anybody else caught that. But anyways, because of the acquisition. So the trajectory and the chronology was really, you're talking 50 years, less than 50 years. You said 1975. It was farming, and then storage, and then apples. Even though he was not an apple orchard operator, he actually was.
Oh, okay. Yes, he bought a fresh apple warehouse and then started putting in apples, and we have over 2,000 acres of fruit. So we have cherries and apples of all different varieties that we pack through our own warehouse.
Okay. So you own the acres, and then you also buy or contract for other growers. So that's the next thing about how the business looks now. And I want to get into some of the other stuff, but you grow a lot of your own stuff, and it's more common, and correct me if I'm wrong here, certainly you're talking broad acre stuff, corn, soybeans, and wheat. It's commodity production. You take it to the grain elevator. You might forward contract it, sell it, whatever, but it's not grown on a contractual arrangement. Specialty crop is more grown on a contractual arrangement, and it tends to be, there is more vertical and consolidation, it seems like, in the specialty space. So kind of give me a read on that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of vegetable processors left kind of in the country. Obviously kind of out west, we're probably one of the largest and the most diverse. We have a processing plant in Michigan. You mentioned New Brunswick in your open. We've actually got a dehydrated potato plant in New Brunswick. So we've really diversified. I mean, we have north of 15 processing plants kind of throughout the region of Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, and a lot of farm ground around those locations to support them from the production standpoint.
Your feeding, let's just go with potatoes first. You're growing 2/3 of the potatoes that you need to keep the processing plants that you own going. So if I am 20 miles down the road and I'm growing potatoes, do I do that on a contract, or do I just grow a whole bunch of potatoes and hope you'll take them? How is you want to feed the machine, meaning the processing plant.
Right.
And then, so do you do that on a contract with these other growers?
Yeah, so that's normally what we'll do is we've got long-term grower relationships, people that have been growing for us for a long time. If we're not growing them, we've been, like evergreen type contracts with growers. They've kind of become, part of our quote unquote family.
Yep.
That grow for us. And a lot
of, that's usually on a ton. And so you say, hey, hey, Roy, you're going to grow 1,000 acres of potatoes, and that's roughly going to yield this much. And those are all, are they priced ahead of time?
Yeah, usually they're priced ahead of time, and we'll usually either contract either acres or tonnage. It kind of just depends on the grower. Each one are different. They might be normally a fresh grower. They might be a process grower also. They might do chip stock. But for like in our dehydrated type business, yeah, we'll contract with them, usually around the basis of a French fry process price, roughly. And then, yeah, we'll just contract their acres or volume each year.
Yeah. So, and if they have, you say if you do acres and then they have a bang up crop, then you take every acre. If they contract tons and they have a shortfall, do they have to go and buy potatoes to fill you, or do they say, we had a hailstorm here and we're under production?
Yeah, and that's usually like a conversation that we'll have. Usually we'll kind of know something's happening. Usually we'll have, talks about that. And, all of a sudden there's a crop problem here. Hey, we had a hailstorm, or we had, we lost water to a farm. And we're going to, either we'll go out and, we'll work with them on, trying to cover up that potential loss, or figure out a kind of a way to work with them. Usually it's just a really transparent conversation, right?
So you grow a lot of your own stuff. You buy the other stuff, and then in most, all that's contracted. You want to keep the facility going, and then you've talked about things that would be new to a lot of folks. Remember, I've got everything from machinery salespeople to crop insurance types to whatever. You talked about fried, dehyde, chip, frozen, fresh, specialty seed. Just about potatoes. Tell me about that whole thing. I know that, having spoken to potato groups, most potatoes are consumed as fries or frozen and fried products. So kind of take me down this whole thing, because you produce and process all of them, I think. Go ahead and give us a little background on that.
Yeah, the only thing we don't do French fries. Although we have roasters in some of our plants, and we'll do like a baked fry, but it's a very specialized thing. But in terms of like French fries you'd eat at McDonald's or Burger King or Arby's, like, we don't do any of that. Now, we do grow processing potatoes for French fryers, or we'll grow processing varieties for chips. So, fries or chips would be the most consumed. But we do a lot of fresh. We go in the retail and wholesale market, or export with our fresh potato crop that you would see, like in a bag at the grocery store, or you'd see like open top on the shelf. And then dehydrated products that you'd see in, products like Pringles or Stacks, for instance, or you'd see.
That's a dehydrated product?
Typically a dehydrated, flour.
So wait a minute, of all things, you guys have 30,000 acres every year of 140,000 acres of farming operations that are potatoes. And I said that most potatoes are consumed as fries. You said, oh yeah, we don't do that. Well, what the hell? What is it just because you bought a processing or opened a processing facility and there was not as much demand for it? Or, how did that market sort itself out?
Well, to back up, Damian, in the early years, the dehydration industry was really kind of the waste stream of, the fresh potatoes, the sort outs, the culls, the dehydration where those would go. No different than in the early years of French fry plants, the small potatoes would go to that. And then, the advent as, the tater tots, what we call the form product, the hash brown patties that you'd see at McDonald's as an example, those became the source, the small potatoes, the sort outs kind of became the source of those products, kind of a value added type item.
Yep.
And so dehydration potato business kind of had to shift a little bit and relied more on contract potatoes, right? Instead of taking those sort outs, that we still do take sort outs from fresh sheds, but the bulk of what we run through there is actually what we call field run potatoes, either out of the field or put into storage. And then
you're growing them actually for that specific purpose. All right. I got so many questions about this. I think my listeners are going, hey, I'm glad you're asking questions, because I eat potatoes, but I had no idea. And it's something you grew up in it. But, you don't realize, like the dairy farm kid talks about stuff that, it's the same thing. Hey, dear listeners, maybe you've heard me talk about this. I'm wearing their hat right now. It's Redox. Redox Bionutrients is my new sponsor here in 2024, and they're a really cool company. I went to their headquarters up in Burley, Idaho, through their greenhouse, checked out their R&D. Darren Moon's founded this company 30 years ago. And I know that there's a lot of skepticism about biologicals because there's 1,200 biological companies, venture capital, tech money, Silicon Valley money has been pouring in. Just honestly, it opened a funnel of money. And some of them, let's face it, you don't know if their products are proven. Well, Redox is not in that category at all. Redox has been around for 30 years. They started in specialty crop, then moved into turf, and now increasingly moving into broadacre agriculture. 30 years of proven in-field success. Redox is helping farmers shift from traditional fertilizers to highly efficient carbon-based technology. Redox Bionutrients provides superior nutrition, abiotic stress defense, root growth, soil health, and efficient nutrient uptake. You can find out more at redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. Check it out. I'm wearing their hats. 30 years, their products are proven. Check them out. Anyway, Keith Tiegs, Oregon Potato Company, fried, dehydrated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm trying to understand this as a layman, as a guy that had potatoes in his garden growing up. So you got the good potatoes that used to be that, those are bakers. Those are going to be in the bag. Those are, and then wait, these are turd taters. These turd taters are going to go and be made into hash browns. And that used to be like, it was the sort. And what you're saying is now there's so much of that, formed products, tater tots, popular hash brown patties, whatever those things, you're growing specifically for that now. Whereas it used to be a call, now it's grown specifically for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're making, frozen products that you would see in a soup. We're doing roasted products that you may see in a frozen meal, that you may see, on a deli, at a grocery store of a roasted type product. I mean, potatoes are eaten a lot of different ways. If you go to the grocery store, you see, food service restaurant, say you go to Applebee's and you see like a roasted potato as a side, right? Like that would be the type of products that we would do. So there's a lot of different outlets outside of just, chips and French fries. And that's kind of what we've specialized in some of those other niche areas.
So you have, obviously you grow for your own plants. So you grow specifically what your plants want, your processing facilities want. Your processing facilities, when I was preparing for your meeting that I'm coming to be a speaker, I was just glancing around your website. You've got facilities that do mostly, so a potato comes in from your own farm or been in storage or whatever. The plants run all year round, right? They don't just run when the potatoes are coming out of the field. They're a year-round facility, right?
Yeah, they're typically running 7 days a week, 363 days a year.
Really?
Other than when we need to go down for repair and maintenance or, a variety of different things, CapEx project or something like that.
Yeah. But, so if you're going to put in some huge new infrastructure or if you have to shut down for maintenance. So other than that, do they run a couple shifts?
Yeah, usually we're running 3 shifts. We try to run them as hard as we possibly can. I mean, that's really that's how you pay for them.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, I was a factory worker. My wife and I both were factory workers, so we know all about maximizing an industrial facility. Your plants are mostly dehydrating or chipping, or what? Tell me since you don't do fries, because that's a different kind of processor. Your plants do almost everything but fries.
Yeah, so we got some plants that do dehydrated. We have other plants that don't do any dehydrated, that will do just straight vegetables. We got plants that will only do fruit. So just as a company as a whole, I mean, OPC, yeah, it's a potato company, but it's uniquely different. Really, it's really just a name. But yeah, we have plants that don't even run potatoes. But the ones that do run potatoes, I mean, they run a variety of different dehydrated, different frozen, might run shred, might run roasted, might do all kinds of different things.
When it goes from, then the other part about you're one of these plants need to run full tilt. Are you contracted? Does Cisco or I'm trying to think of, large food service, because more of your stuff, I'm assuming some of it goes to food service. You told me in a call, isn't it Pringles? You said there's like a 50% chance if I eat a Pringle that it came from your facility and your field.
Pretty good chance. Yeah.
Go have a Pringles, dear folks. Okay. So
eat a lot of them.
I want to talk to you about numbers here in a little bit too, but are you on a contract? Does Cisco Food Service or some large, I'm trying to think of what, U.S. Food Service, the kind of places that supply restaurants and institutions and schools and all that, are you on a contract with them?
Yeah, we typically go through with most of the companies, like we'll negotiate an annual contract. Actually, in the vegetable business, I was just at a meeting. American Frozen Food Institute. Our meeting this year was in San Diego, and my dad always called it the Super Bowl of sales. And it's where basically the buyers of frozen, fruits and vegetables and sellers basically convene. We're going through what we call our contracting season right now. We started planting up here in the Columbia Basin, started planting potatoes here about 3-4 weeks ago. But we're planting a lot of, peas right now, sugar snaps. We'll start planting sweet corn here in the next couple of weeks.
So the stuff you said some potatoes and peas go in the ground like at the end of February, and in the Columbia Basin of Washington.
The Columbia Basin, yeah, we were planting the end of February. My sister's birthday is February 20th, and that was kind of always our target date. If the weather was right, we try to be planting potatoes by February 20th. And there's typically a lot of onions that are getting planted around that time, late February, early March. But this in the vegetable world, like this is our contracting season right now. We're kind of gathering in, we're doing pricing, requests for quotes, requests for price, getting those bids in, getting them submitted to all the major food companies, be it food
so
service.
You called me, you were actually checking into your hotel in San Diego, lovely town, by the way. I lived there once. You were checking your hotel in San Diego to go to the frozen food thing. You're meeting with somebody with, I don't know, Ore-Ida or with whatever. You're meeting with
Kraft
somebody
Heinz,
that buys a few million pounds of tater tots or dehydrated potatoes, or I use a potato for whatever. That's who you're talking to.
Vegetables, yeah. Meeting with basically all the major food companies in the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, how much of American grown potatoes, speaking to all over the world, go overseas?
Oh boy. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. You got to remember, I haven't been in this business that long, Damian. So I'm sure those numbers can be pulled. Like, I don't know. We obviously
what about from the Oregon Potato Company? You certainly have contracts then with a big food service company. Is that just is an annual thing? They say we want this many, and do you price it at that point, or does the price then move every month based on a market condition? How's the thing set?
Usually how those things go, and every company is a little bit different. Some companies might contract more on like an evergreen type arrangement, so you're just constantly under contract, and all you're really doing is just basically negotiating price. Depending on, like in the vegetable world, like sweet corn will typically run almost in somewhat of a parallel with the grain market, right? With field corn. Because, us as a farmer, as a grower, if the sweet corn price isn't very good, if our contract isn't, as good as field corn, then why wouldn't I just plant field corn, right? So we have to make it, for the farmer, for the grower, we have to make it advantageous to want to grow sweet corn.
Okay, so how much of your stuff goes overseas? You must know that.
Yeah, we ship a lot of product overseas, and just because of our proximity in the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest, we ship a lot of product overseas. Probably 30 to 40% of it would be a pretty good number. But we do a lot of export all over the world.
You've got a few people that's all they do is sit with a headset on and a computer screen and sell, I'm assuming, every day, right?
Yeah, we got a lot of salesmen throughout the country. So.
Yeah. And then handling the international stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we talk about a couple more tater questions, and we're going to go to the rest of the mix. You said soups and other things. I assume there's a special process. You have one of your 15 processing facilities that's just doing something that we wouldn't even think about, like taking a potato and turning it into something to be turned into something. Beyond fresh and even frozen or fried and even dehydrated, there's other processing that has to happen so it can end up in a TV dinner or something, right? Mash.
Sure. Most of our, we don't do any mashed, but we do have products that we'll make that will get turned into a mashed.
Okay.
Right. Like we'll take a IQF potato cube, for instance.
An IQF. So
that's
industry vernacular.
Yeah. Sorry. Individually quick frozen. That is essentially, say, a cube, and it might be every customer's kind of got a different dimension they might want, like a 3/16 cube or, 1/8 inch cube or,
right.
And then, they may end up further processing it, in their facility, say make a mash that might go into a TV dinner or into a frozen meal. But no, most of our plants run a variety of different things. We do have one dehy facility. That's all it does is just does flakes and flour. But most all the other plants do a variety of different things. They can do roasted, they can do frozen, they can do dehydrated. And that's, kind of back to a little bit of our vertical integration. We try to be not kind of a one-stop shop. So most of these plants have the capabilities to run, year round. And run a variety of different things. So we've got a plant actually here in Pasco that's fairly diverse. It'll run apples, it'll run zucchini, it'll run potato, it'll run about everything in between, right? From A to Z. It's just unique that way. And a lot of our plants are kind of set up very similarly.
The only thing then is my last potato question, seed and fresh. So, fresh, that's what obviously most people think of. They don't even realize they're eating a hell of a lot more potatoes that are not fresh, but the bag of potatoes at the grocery or whatever, you do participate in that.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we've got a fresh apple or fresh potato program that we ship, to retail, wholesale, food service right out of our fresh shed.
Got it. All right. So the rest of the acres, you can put potatoes in about every 3 or 4 years, sometimes even more or less frequently than that. So you got all these other things that you're producing. Some of it's just commodity. You said, basically corn or wheat or whatever. But then all of these specialty things, you have processing for everything. In other words, if you grow a specialty crop, does it ever go to somebody else's processing facility or does it all stay in-house?
Typically on all the vegetables, like say specialty stuff, like we do cauliflower, we do broccoli, we do, raspberries, blueberries. We raise a lot of blueberries for our own needs that might go in a fruit blend.
Keith, how many farm managers do you have you just rattled off, like this is making me dizzy. And I imagine the average farm person that's really good at growing corn and soybeans, like what the hell? Cauliflower, sweet peas, green beans, onions, blueberries, potatoes, sweet corn. I've probably missed a few. How many farm managers do you have? How many people do you have that are just managing what happens on those acres?
Probably at least 50. There are a lot of farm managers, but we run a fairly lean operation. We've got managers they'll manage 20,000 acres, right? And have a layer of, a team underneath them.
Right.
That'll help support them.
If you're at the bar in San Diego, not with the frozen food people, and then someone says, what do? Do you tell them you're a farmer? Do you tell them you're a food processor? Do you just tell them life insurance? They'll leave you alone?
I just tell them I'm a farm kid.
All right. You operate in an area that you said before we hit record, last time we talked, that seems that Washington is desperately, the state of Washington, as agricultural as it is, and most people don't realize how agricultural it is, seems like it's trying to become California, which is also very agricultural, but also heavily regulated. And it seems like they're embracing some sort of unattainable environmental regulation that's going to put farmers out of business. So I want to talk to you about the political / environmental / regulatory environment. Before I do that, I want to talk to you, my listeners, about Truterra. Truterra is focused on supporting farmers at every stage of the sustainability journey to help plan, make, and maintain regenerative management practices that can improve agronomic, economic, and environmental sustainability of a farmer's operation for the long term. So you know what? We're heading into a low income year on broadacre farms. We're talking about 40% off farm revenue based on this year's projections compared to what it was 2 years ago, which was the all-time high of farm revenue. So if you're going to take a 40% deduct, why not look at ways to diversify your revenue? If you are a farmer, if you own this farm ground, you could be getting paid for practices that help bring in money. I'm talking about sustainability practices and programs. Go to TruterraAg.com, TruterraAg.com. They're a part of Land O'Lakes. Check it out. Okay. The regulatory environment, Keith, is not good. And everybody's listening to this knows that we have so much vastly improved our practices. When I was talking about the old days, and people say, oh, these big farmers like Oregon Potato Company ain't like the old days. Like, well, do you think that somehow in the old days we were better for the environment? Because trust me, I was around. The Dust Bowl was in the old days. Was that what you want? We do a hell of a job environmentally using less natural resources per calorie of food produced than we ever have. Our sustainability practices, soil amendments that we're using, way less harsh chemistry, certainly on an ounce per calorie produced. It's amazing. But yet, there's the regulatory environment. California is just about knocking farmers out of business, and Washington seems like it's on a similar path. Tell me about your experience.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. You know, you and I talked about this kind of once before, but, you know, Washington State, is being on the east side of the state. We're very much, an ag. It's a very heavily ag, right? Really a lot of irrigation, very low rainfall. The Tri-Cities, I mean, we're Pasco, Washington. I mean, we're less than 7 inches annually of rainfall. So we require a lot of irrigation. So a lot of center pivot irrigation, orchards, under tree irrigation, but rely heavily on irrigation. But, you know, the west side of our state, obviously, with the population kind of dominates. And so as it comes to a lot of the policy, it's very left leaning. So, you know, like our Washington State, the minimum wage is $16.28.
I know you're concerned. You were concerned about becoming political. You just said the left part of Washington, meaning like the Seattle area, is left leaning. That's like the understatement of the universe you just made right there, Keith. I think my listeners, a couple of my listeners drove off the road right now saying, is he acting like he had to parse his words to tell us that Seattle is left leaning? I think we got that part. Yes. And that tends to somehow, and I've never understood it, that if you're a hardcore lefty, you have to then believe that environmentalism is somehow your cause. And like, that's fine. We like the environment if we're conservatives also, but that doesn't mean destruction of business. And that's the tough part. Okay, you talked about irrigation, but it's not like you're depleting. I think the people in the panhandle of Texas and are going to be worse off because the Ogallala aquifer has been depleted. You're not depleting aquifers. You've got the water. You just don't have the rainfall, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, we've got great water. The Columbia River in Pasco actually is the Tri-Cities is kind of the confluence of, you know, the Snake River and the Yakima River dumping into the Columbia River, which ultimately, you know, drops out in Vancouver, Portland area. But, you know, the irrigation here, I mean, the number, I'm going to probably quote this incorrectly, but for irrigation, we only use about 2% of the water that flows, you know, through here. So it's a very, very low number.
So what about you talked about the vote, and I said that, you know, you're headquartered in Washington, you farm in 3 states, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. You've got stuff in all those places. Idaho doesn't seem to have as much political pressure that seems geared against ag. Oregon and Washington more so. There's a hell of a lot of agriculture in your part of the world. Like you said, you talked about Yakima. 95% of the hops, you know, produced in the United States are in the Yakima Valley. That's what I was told when I worked there once for the Washington Farm Bureau. You know, you've got tree fruit, you've got wheat, you've got potatoes, and then we go on about all the specialty crops that are there. Beyond the water, there's a regulatory. I mean, it's worse than just the water, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with super high minimum wage, one of the highest in the nation outside of Washington, D.C. at $16.28 an hour. 3 years ago, we were instituted with overtime rules. It started at 55 and then went to 48. And now this year we're at 2024, we're at 40 hours for minimum, for the overtime. So it makes it really, really challenging, to run a farm operation, right?
Yeah, because
run 7 days a week.
During the busy season, you're going to have more than 40 hours out in the fields, right? And even if is minimum wage even get? I mean, potatoes are almost like completely mechanical, so it's not like you're requiring. But some of the other specialty crops, you're requiring manual labor, which is probably at that $16 an hour, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But even in a potato operation, I mean, you need, operators, from planting to cultivation to harvest to, truck, piler operators. I mean, there's still a lot of people within that system, from the moment you bring the seed in to plant it, all the way through to, storage and post-harvest.
Yeah. So you get killed on on wage rates, has it gotten to the point where you're like, maybe we should go to another country?
No, I mean, this is kind of our home base. But you just have to figure out, right, how to get better, through, you know, digital agricultural technology adoption, things like that. You just figure out how to kind of get better, right? And kind of utilize, with a company our size, utilizing scale to, bigger equipment, bigger tractors, bigger tillage equipment that, get across acres quicker, better, harvesters,
You talk about the labor rate, since you're as much a processor as you are a farmer. I mean, obviously you've got 15, I didn't know it was that many, 15 processing facilities that are running 24/7
plus. Yeah.
The number of employees that are in do you know your number of processing employees?
It's over 5,000.
Over 5,000 in the processing. And so again, over 5,000, more than 5,000 employees that are in the processing facilities in 15 different facilities. If you had to put two more dollars per hour on them, obviously it doesn't take long. So you're talking tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just continually to try to, and of course it's hard to find those people.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we're dealing with. I mean, we're just constantly, seems like we're trying to fill positions. And so of course, with technology, I mean, we're looking at adding, sorting equipment or, the next best thing in all these plants to continually take out labor that sometimes we just can't find. We just can't get.
I was wondering about that. And is it different? I mean, you're spread, and you've even got processing, you said, over in Maine or New Brunswick or what have you. You've got this issue in all places, right?
Yeah. All over the country, everywhere.
But I was saying you've got the issue of having a hard time getting employees at all the places.
Yeah, we actually, this is going to sound crazy, but we actually have a tool plant in Ronan, Montana that does mixed drill bits. We can't get enough people there, right? Influx of people into Montana.
Yeah, we can't go to Montana and they bitch about the fact there's too much of Californians moving in, but apparently they don't want to work in a tool plant.
No, they sure don't.
I know we're getting long here. You just looked at your watch. You're not a very good poker player, Keith.
I just had a phone call. I just seen who it was.
You can't take a phone call when you're talking to the business of agriculture.
I can't.
You know that.
I can't. No.
Okay, beyond regulatory, talk about management. Like I said, you have a dizzying amount going on. You have 5,000 employees in the processing side. On the farming side, there's just another several hundred, right?
Yeah.
How do you manage all that? How did your old man manage all that?
Honestly, I don't know how he did. It's pretty wild. I mean, I spoke to it a little bit earlier. I mean, we're a very lean organization, and I think that's one thing we're trying to do is we're kind of trying to find that happy balance of, we have a team of incredibly great people. My dad built a great organization, great foundation. There's great people here. But a lot of people wear a lot of different hats, no different than myself. Helping oversee the farming operations, helping oversee our processing operations. But just continuing to bring, people into those places and just maybe make it a little bit more streamlined, workforce development, essentially. But it's every day is just, all you can do is just get up and go. And, I kind of, one of the things I've been telling our people, and, I heard this a long time ago and I really liked it, is just every day, just try to get 1% better. Right. And so every day, like in my role, is just try to figure out how to just be more efficient with your time, just be better every single day.
Yep.
And just try to get more done. And what you don't get done today, you're just going to have to get it done tomorrow.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, I'm certain. I mean, and you were in the business, then you went and did your own business, you came back to, take this on. And this is a major ship. I mean, this is you might be piloting it, but this ship doesn't run by you alone. It can't.
No. It takes a lot of good people.
I'm going to ask you a couple entrepreneurial or business owner questions, which, we call this the business of agriculture after all. So, and I wrote a business book called Do Business Better, and I put in there about your personality as a business owner. There's the person that is really good at production. There's a person that really loves processing, and process. There's the promotion, there's the profit side, meaning the money side, and there's these different things. What do you think I know what I am, like process. if you, I understand those manufacturing and processing facilities you have, but if you wanted me to go in there and run them and figure out how to make the line speed go 1/10 of a second faster, I'd lose my shit. I have no interest in doing any of that. I'm a promotion guy. I'm a profit money guy. I get the production side of it. Where's your strength? Because you've got all of it: production, processing, the money side of it, the promotion side of it. You know, we're at a frozen food conference. You had to be the promote. Where are you an A and where are you a D?
You know, I would say
probably ask yourself those questions now that you're reassuming the role. Yeah.
I very much do. I mean, I think one of the things, I mean, I grew up on the farm, right? At a very young age, I knew that on the weekends that if I got up and I got a bowl of cereal and got my dad the newspaper, that I was going to get to go farming. Right. And so really from the production side, that's what I really enjoy. I mean, yesterday I spent most of the day driving around, several of the farms, looking at crops, walking fields, a variety of things like that. So from the production side, I feel like I'm really, really good on that side. When it comes to the plants, I'm kind of like you. I understand it. I understand what we do. I understand, from a very high level, but again, from the efficiency stuff, I need to have good people to know how to do that.
Okay, but when it comes, you gravitate to production. You love production, farm production, process. You're like me. You get it, but focusing on it, you'd rather have somebody hit you in the head with a bat. Probably that's the way I am. Okay, so process, you get it, but you don't want to focus on it. Promotion, you've got salespeople. Obviously, you have to, but you're a salesperson also. Give yourself a grade on the promotion side.
Well, I would say that's actually probably where I'm really good as well. From the standpoint that when you have a company that's vertically integrated like this, I just tell the story, right? We're vertically integrated. We farm all these acres. We process that through our plants. We're doing a lot of things from, sustainable ag practices, regenerative ag, technology adoption, market diversification, a lot of those things. Like I can tell that story, and I feel that I'm really good at it. And I think that one of the things I feel like that I'm really good at is I kind of have this youthful energy about me, right? Yeah. And so that's where I feel that's kind of one of my strong points as well.
You have youthful energy for at least a few more years.
At least a few more years, yeah. But I'm also, I've told several people this. I was in this business for a while, then I was out of it, and I'm back in it. Now I kind of feel like I'm back home, and I'm super energized about it. I'm excited to be here. I'm honored. I'm humbled. So it's a lot of it's a lot of emotion, right? But I really enjoy what I'm doing. This is our family business, right? Okay. And it's easy to go tell that story.
Yeah. So the other part of it, I'm not the first person to say this, but it's obvious. The more you advance in your career, or certainly the more you advance in business ownership, the more you become a manager of people and money versus machines and processing facilities and tractors and all that, even agronomics, et cetera. So those are the other two P's: people and profit, the money side of it. Which one are you better at, manager of people or manager of money? Because there's a lot of capital at play in something like your operation.
I'll be honest with you. I think I'm actually good at both. I feel like I resonate obviously with a lot of people. I can jump on a tractor and run a tractor. I can work right alongside, our farm crew. A lot of them, I grew up with and worked alongside. Yeah. I've been in these plants. I've spent time in plants, in a freezer, tearing fans out of them.
Yeah. It does a lot for the morale of when you see the owner or the president of the company that has gotten his hands dirty and can go out and walk through a processing facility. I'm sure it does a lot for the morale. So the people side of it, you're okay with. The money side of it, obviously you've got money advice. I mean, you have people that make sure that money is coming in. You've got all that kind of stuff, but it's a lot going on. There's a lot of capital expenditure.
Right. And I tend to look at it from a high level, right? I mean, we got people that, put a lot of numbers, and we put a lot of P&Ls in place, and variety of different metrics that we're looking at, constantly. But the good thing was when I left this business 8 years ago, I had my own farm. I started a fertilizer business from scratch, and that's what I was, right? Like I was the money manager. Yeah. So I built that business. So I understood it, I understood it inside and out. And so Granted, this business is much, much, much larger, but still the concepts are still the same, right? It doesn't matter if you farm 1,000 acres, you farm 140. It's still right. The numbers just look different.
Yeah. Well, it's like the comma moves. The comma moves
Right.
on the zeros behind it, but fundamentals are fundamentals.
Right.
I think at heart. All right, take me forward. What do you see that my listeners don't see? What do you think that you didn't share with us today? Whether it's about the business of agriculture, about running your business, about the future, give it to me.
I think some of the things that, we look at definitely is, in our business is consumer trends and preferences. That seems to be shifting kind of at all times and trying to figure out, and I'll just speak to this point. When I was at the frozen food show, I can't tell you how many companies I had come in and they said, "Hey, what do you have that can go on an air fryer?" Right? Like that's kind of one of the new things. Like everyone's got one on their countertop now. Everybody's buying one. It's this $100 or $150 up, they go up in price, but what can you put in an air fryer, right? And so like we do Brussels sprouts that are roasted and then robed and seasoned, like that was one, or a roasted potato, or things like that. So like the air fryer was kind of a big one this year. So I think understanding those consumer trends and preferences and what the consumer, doesn't have yet that they need. So we do a lot of forward thinking on that. We've got a corporate chef that's always, thinking up new and different ideas, or, a salesman or somebody might have an idea, on a blend or something.
I love where you're going with this because, and I've been saying this for more than a decade to my agricultural audiences. I said, remember, agriculture is a consumer business.
Right.
The bib overall wearing old bumpkin ass that goes to the coffee shop and bitches about everything. That doesn't work. We all just be happy we're feeding you. Well, we've been in a surplus situation for 50 years now agriculturally, and it's only going to get worse as our productivity ramps up. The consumer is going to demand more variety, and also you are going to not just be able to produce what you love producing and tell them to go shove it, because that's not. So I love that what you just said there. We're a consumer business, and we are because we're in a specialty crop business. I think we are. Period. I've talked about this. Pork, we're oversupplied on pork, and pork's dry. Make it have more flavor, bring back the fat. I mean, these are the things that are going to have to happen. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, no. And I think along those lines, like with some of the younger demographic, they want to know where their food comes from. Right. And we have to be better in ag at telling that story of, where it comes from, telling the story and understanding those consumer trends and preferences. And that kind of all goes in that all encompassing, as I talk about consumer, it's not just, getting a new item in front of it. It's help telling the story of where this came from, right? Here's the chain, right? And along with that, the food security and the supply chain, like structure amongst that, right? We have to do a better job at that. And that's one of the things we're trying to educate our customers on, to tell ultimately the consumer, how that all channels.
Right. Yeah, I've always wondered if the consumer really, really cares, or they want to feel good. I think they want to feel good that they're, one of the big ones is now they want to feel that their purchase was a benefit, that it was good for the environment, or that it was good for whatever. I like all that. All right. Anything else on our way out the door here, Mr. Keith?
I don't think so. And I think what kind of plays into that, I spoke to the sustainable ag, and, we talked about that a little bit, and regenerative ag. That kind of goes right into that whole consumer, trend and preference, of being able to kind of tell that story, and that we're managing the soil, we're managing water, and we're managing, fertilization practices and chemistry, like using chemistry, right. And in sustainable ways.
Yeah, and what's interesting is your stuff ultimately goes to a consumer's table, but you don't sell directly to them. You sell through the next layer of value added. But certainly, I think a big opportunity is publicizing that we use half the amount of water now per pound of potato produced because you're getting more efficient because you've had to. Those are the kind of stories that I think probably become environmental marketing almost.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think there's been a lot of, just in the irrigation, I've told the story a few times to some of our customers. The advancement in irrigation technology has come a long way. Variable rate irrigation, the telemetry, it's come a long way in just, 10 years.
Yeah, and you can run it from your phone, and like you said, variable rates. So you're not just we're using way less water per pound of potato or sweet pea or whatever produced because of the technology. And those are the kind of stories that our consumer needs to hear, and they haven't heard that yet. But
yeah,
I agree. All right, his name's Keith Tiegs, Oregon Potato Company. Awesome conversation. 15 processing facilities, 140,000 acre farmer in Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. And I'm going to be speaking to the management of this company on Thursday, March 28th at 3 p.m. So if you're listening to this and you work for this company, I want to see you there. It's going to be in Pasco. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, looking forward to it as well. Thank you, Damian.
Thanks for being on here. Remember, check out Land O'Lakes company, Truterra. Truterra is helping farmers on their sustainability journey and get paid for practices you might already be doing, like strip till, reduced till, those kinds of things, nitrogen reductions. You can get paid for that. Go to TruterraAg.com. Also, check out Redox Grows, Redox Bionutrients, improving your soil health, efficiency of nutrient uptake, abiotic stress defense, and nutrition. That's what they're all about. Go to Redox Grows. Check it out. Until next time, his name is Keith Tiegs, Oregon Potato Company. Going to be speaking to them. I'm really excited about that. I know this is educational for you because it was way educational for me. So anyway, thanks for being here. Till next time, I'm Damian Mason, and this is The Business of Agriculture. Well, that concludes another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. This episode was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You know, everybody in agriculture understands the importance of soil health. We also keep an eye on our soil better than we ever did through advanced soil testing. But what if there was a company that provided predictive analytics, not just checking out nutrients and all the elements that are in there, but also could tell you the degree of risk you face with disease and pest pressure? That's right, Pattern Ag can do that. They actually can tell you, hey, you're going to have a real issue here. You can proactively treat for corn rootworm or cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome before the problem actually starts costing you yield. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to find the nearest rep that can help you start doing better for your soil.